Welcome to Jeff's Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. I call it that because there are three important aspects to how this build works. The diners, getting gobbled up by your ultimate, the drive-ins with the hypervelocity ability, and the dives with, well, Jeff's Dives. We're going to get straight into a round of Nightmare 70, and you're going to see me straight away start spitting out some bubbles to line up a good shot with our hypervelocity ability. This is where a lot of our damage is going to come from by lining up these good shots. I like to try and kite a bunch of them into a group, and then charge the sprint while they're getting into a line behind me, and then I'll turn around and ram into all of them with a group of bubbles, and it stacks the damage quickly. I also like to use my ult as often as possible because of the Big Fish perk. Every time we swallow 10 vampires with our ult, Jeff gets bigger, gains increased health, and deals more damage. The more often you activate this, the bigger you'll be by the final fight, and you'll deal massive damage to bosses. Just be careful when doing it into exploders because sometimes they'll pop as you're coming up from the animation and they'll kill you before you can swim away. Sometimes I try to prime the healing button just in case if I'm trying to ult into a group of exploders. As far as Arcana is concerned, I'd focus on close quarters as your primary damage booster since all of your damage will be close range anyway. You don't normally need to take health because Jeff gains so much health from his ult, so try to take damage reduction and block percentage where possible. You're going to see me take health over damage reduction during this run, and I'm going to tell you right now, it didn't affect anything, but it wasn't the correct choice. As you get in higher waves, the extra health doesn't contribute as much as damage reduction. Another strategy I like to employ with the ult is, since most of the time you're not going to get any meaningful kills anyway, you can spit them all into a corner, and then ram the corner after filling it with bubbles. This is surprisingly effective. You also deal continuous damage to the vampires in your belly with a specific perk, so as long as you keep moving, you can stack the damage a bit until you spit them out. And if you've noticed, I also have this bad habit of picking up my bubbles before the next round. I would recommend not doing this since you can deploy more bubbles than you have charges for, so if you keep them on the board, you can create new ones over time. I just have this impulsive need to have a tidy battlefield, so I have to clean it up in between. Jeff does have to complete his maid duties after all. As far as gear is concerned, the most important piece is making sure that your exclusive has the ability Hyper Sprint. You can charge to dash forward, dealing damage to rammed enemies equal to whatever percent it says of hide-and-seek's base collision damage. The higher your base collision damage, the more damage that this ability will deal. I also like having Unshark Stoppable enhancement and Bubbling Impact enhancement. Hide-and-seek ramming damage scales based on movement speed, and during hide-and-seek, the shockwave damage from moving or using hypersprint to ram bubbles is increased. Both of these together can really increase your damage, and Deep Breath enhancement allows you to stay underwater longer so you don't have to come up to recharge as often. I also have Bubbling Impact on my weapon as well, with a bunch of extra damage enhancements. The rest of your gear doesn't really matter, just pick whatever's best for you and your perks. Speaking of perks, we're not going to go over everything, but I'm going to go over the most important ones. We're going to take 1 point into Deep Breath because we want to activate the enhancement abilities, but our gear is going to be doing most of the work, so we don't want all three. We do want all three of Forward Frenzy because that's going to increase our damage as we're ramming into things. We also want all three of Big Fish Frenzy so we can increase our health, size, and damage as much as possible whenever we use our ult. I also like having Unshark Stoppable. Of course, we need to activate it for our gear. This does more of the work than the gear does, so make sure you take all three of these or get really good gear. Bubble Bath allows us to cast our healing bubble during hide and seek, so we don't have to come up to place our bubbles. I also took Churning the Seas because this is what does continuous damage in your ultimate while you're moving around the board to the enemies that are in your belly. And I also took Burp because whenever you participate in a KO, you get a healing charge back, final hits restore more, and your cooldown is reduced just flat. Even if you don't get any healing charges back from the ability that often, you're still getting a cooldown reduced, so I think this is worth it. Now, as we move into the boss fight here, keep in mind that the bosses are surprisingly easy if you line up a good bubble shot. Right here, I took out half of Dracula's health right off the bat. I'm almost immediately going into the sword phase. I did one game where I dealt so much damage to him off of that first attack that he skipped the sword phase altogether, and we went straight into the gem phase. Dracula is kind of a pushover whenever you're playing this build really well, and you can also use your ultimate in the arena because Dracula will summon vampires to attack you during this phase. They say that the opponent is feeding if they're really bad at the game, but Dracula is literally feeding you in this game mode. He's kind of a pushover. Like, he's at half health right here, and I almost just obliterate him. He does go into his final phase before I get to finish him off, and so this battle goes on a little bit longer. But Dracula is genuinely not that difficult. While I didn't need to break them to win this, I was also able to break the crystals super easily. After blowing up the crystals, I went for a lineup here to try to finish him off, but I didn't get a good hit, so I went for it again after dealing most of the damage, and then we managed to get him. But yeah, Dracula was not difficult at all. I also defeated Ratatoskr, Capwolf, and Kingpin using the same method. Ratatoskr and Capwolf took me a little bit longer than I anticipated, so I've edited them down some, but I'm going to show you the full, unedited clip of how I defeated Kingpin. This is with no cuts, no speed-ups, just the straight gameplay of what I did. And there you go. Kingpin is defeated. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a like, subscribe, and leave a comment on what you want to see next. And feel free to watch my Moon Knight Melee build right here. And I'll see you next time.